Sometimes you learn things too late, like, how the Electoral College works. Harris and Trump will devote much of their remaining campaign time to just 7 states. What are those 7 states? Let's find out. After a summer of historic tumult, the path to the presidency for both is becoming clearer. Of course, Donald Trump just fired his campaign dude because he told everyone that New Hampshire is lost. There's no reason to even go to New Hampshire. You're wasting your time. We've lost New Hampshire. They're writing him off. Look at this, man. Democratic vice president and the Republican former president will devote almost all of their remaining time and resources to just 7 states. Which 7 states? Who cares? They're mostly going to be talking about Pennsylvania. They're going to debate in 1 week. Be their first meeting the nation ever. So I wanted to talk about swing states for a second. The swing states, the reason why we have swing states is because we have the dumbest situation. We're the only country in the world to decide that we're going to have this thing called the Electoral College. And the Electoral College isn't totally just like America, you're so stupid, stupid. No. The Electoral College mostly happened because of slavery. And the reason why is because every time they made a new state, they wanted a slave state and a free state. So it used to be if there was a new state, they'd come in twos because you'd want to have one free state and one slave state so that the slave states never felt like they were going to be outvoted. Every time there was the slave states, they don't want new free states because they're afraid that you might take away their slaves. This was a very, very just open and honest. There was no secret. I'm not telling anything that you can't look up online very easily. But the Electoral College itself was invented because when you had the original 13 states, there were guys in the 13 states who weren't worth as much as other guys. Now, first of all, women are worth nothing, okay? But you got to count your population. So they decide that you get representation based on how many people living in your state. Here's the problem. So you count the men and women, the white ones, and the black ones. There's in places like the Carolinas, there were more black people living there than white people. And does that mean that they have a smaller population? Does that mean that the population of South Carolina is smaller than that of, I don't know, look, Virginia is the big one. Virginia, which was a slave state, did they have a smaller population than, say, Maryland at the time, or Philadelphia? Probably not. Or Pennsylvania, I mean. Probably not, because they had black people there. But black people only were 3/5 of a person. And so in order to count how many people you get to vote, you got to count the black people. They counted them as 3/5 of a person. And it's one of the famous things in our Constitution that we actually talk about how black people just aren't worth as much as white people. It's in the Constitution of the United States of America. It's called the Great Compromise, or the 3/5 Compromise, they call it today. But when I was in school, they called it the Great Compromise because it was the only way they could form a union, because the slave thing from the very beginning was controversial. So when it comes to electing a president, they decided that every single state gets at least one congressperson and at least 2 senators. No matter what your population is, you at least get 2 and you at least get 1. So places like Vermont today, they have 3 electoral college votes, 1 for the congressperson and 2 for their senator. But what that means is the people living in Vermont, their votes are worth like 5 times the amount as someone living in Texas or someone living in California, because they have so few people. They have way more representation than they actually should. Yeah. So where do we go from here? We fast forward and we see the Electoral College they start passing laws in the states so that they have more power, so that 51%. If you win 51% of the votes in one of the states, you get all of the electoral college votes. It's all or nothing states, they call them. And almost every one of the states do that so that you get more power in your voting for the presidential elections. So, what that means is that that small percentage that might go back and forth becomes really, really important in a few key states. We call those states swing states. So, like in 2016, Clinton didn't even go to California. And get this, Clinton didn't even go to California to campaign, but California had more people vote for Donald Trump in 2016 than any other state, and he did not win in California. More people voted for Donald Trump in California than anywhere else, and he still didn't win because of the all or nothing rules that the states passed themselves in order to secure more power. They had to do that because the Electoral College. The Electoral College had to happen because of slavery. It's always so much in this country goes back to slavery. So when people start telling you that critical race theory or the institutional racism that happens in this country isn't real, it all goes back to the fact that when we were founded, there slavery was rampant. It was quite normal. It was normal all over the world back then, and now it isn't. But we're dealing with the ghosts of the past today. Is that a problem? It's a major problem. Popular vote should matter. Most countries do a popular slash runoff election, and I love those. I love that style. I really think the all or nothing rule is is a big problem as well. But the issue is no one's going to pull the trigger first. No one wants to no one wants to drop the bomb first, right? So we're not going to get away from it. Congress has voted many times to get rid of the Electoral College because swing states hurt Republicans as much as they hurt Democrats. But they don't like that idea because if you did that, it would change the makeup of the Senate and the Congress, and it might make it so that places like South Dakota and places with small rural communities won't have as much power in the governance of the country. But to me, okay, but I live in a place where there's lots of people. I think it makes sense though, where there's fewer people, you get less representation. But we need to guarantee their rights, which is why we have the Bill of Rights, which should protect them. But it's a problem. Good for New Hampshire. Colorado disqualified Trump too. I know Colorado, but he's still gonna be on the ballot. He's still gonna be on the ballot in Colorado. I mean, New Hampshire is so far gone that swing state, they're saying that they're going to focus everything on Pennsylvania now. And so they're both appearing in Philadelphia. They're going to be doing their debate from Pennsylvania, I think. It's going to be in a few days. By the end of the week, right? The 10th, I think. So in 7 days. So by this time next week, we'll know what the debate looks like, and I'm a little bit afraid of it because the last few debates have been so crazy. You don't know what you're going to get with American politics. It could be Russian roulette. You counted the votes, Vegan Power Lab, wonderful. Vegan Power Lab, did you know that our electoral college system was the only reason we have it is because of slavery? I bet you didn't know. I bet you didn't know. See, the thing is, you'll hear about people talk about electoral college a lot, but it is a vestige of times gone by when white people thought that they were more important than black people. In fact, that black people were only worth 3/5 of a white person. Imagine saying that with a straight face, that we want representation. Well, we're counting the women as one. Okay. Well, we have to count the blacks, right? Well, the blacks are property. Oh, yeah, 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 they're property. But we should count them because we still are representing them. That was the argument. That the people of Virginia were representing the blacks who were only worth 3/5 of a white. It's disgusting. And it worked. Thomas Jefferson, Madison, uh, Washington and Adams are all from Virginia. There you go, because they were the most populous slave state. Think about that shit. Think about that shit, man. It's crazy. And then the word of the day is cronyism. Cronyism is a very good word because it describes a lot of what's going on in politics today. Cronyism. Like if you put into office your brother to be the attorney general, that would be called cronyism or nepotism, appointing your family or appointing your close friends and colleagues into positions of power. Yeah. Ulysses S. Grant was really famous for it. Taft, but also our JFK. JFK appointed his brother and a bunch of other people that he knew from the way in the back in the old days to be in power in the government. It's it's a bad thing. Cronyism. In modern day time, is we have Mr. Trump doing that all the time. He appoints his cronies. City residents are pushing back against cronyism and corruption in their local government. Cronyism is the unfair practice by a powerful person, such as a politician, of giving jobs and other favors to friends without regard for their qualifications. So, like when Brown, what was his name? They put him in charge of FEMA. George W. Bush put him in charge of FEMA because he liked the way he had worked with him on something with horses or something. And so he put him in charge of FEMA. And then Katrina happened and all those people died because the person in charge of FEMA didn't know what to do. Cronyism. If you put someone in charge of something and they don't know what the heck is going on, like Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner is a good example of cronyism. Donald Trump's son-in-law gets into power because he's Donald Trump's son-in-law, but he's not qualified to be the guy in the Middle East, brokering peace in the Middle East. Do you think that maybe the reason why we have such a problem today is because Jared Kushner was in charge of the Middle East for 4 years? Could be. Expertise, not cronyism, is needed to determine which strategies are most likely to lead to meaningful gains. The word cronyism evolved in the 19th century as a spin-off of crony, meaning friend or pal. It is in its younger days, cronyism simply meant friendship or the ability to make friends. The word didn't turn out bad until this next century when Americans started using it to refer to the act of playing political favorites. If cronyism is new to your vocabulary, perhaps you're more familiar with the related term nepotism, favoritism based on kinship, especially in professional or political contexts. See, nepotism is usually blood related, and cronyism is like your pals. Like Rex Tillerson was the head of Exxon, and Donald Trump put him in charge of. I think he was Secretary of State. He was Secretary of State. It's crazy. Or George W. Bush took Dick Cheney, who was really good friends with his father, and so he knew him when he was a kid. Like George W. Bush knew him when he was working with his dad, so he put this guy also in power. Cronyism. These guys that you grew up with. Like if you suddenly became the mayor of Amsterdam and you put all of your programmer friends into office and into positions of power simply because they were your friends and not because they were experts in anything, you would be guilty of cronyism.